Hello, everyone. You are watching, what are you watching? Sunday Talks with Kelly and Lisa. That's the kind of show we're going to have today. We're talking about shadow work and how some of the recent events play into shadow work. We're going to start there. We're going to see where we end up. You want to start with the concert thing that
My goodness. To be those two people right now, I can't imagine what sort of humiliation they're experiencing, and not to mention their families. I,
yeah,
I just I couldn't imagine, but everybody knows what happened. If you don't know, you're gonna find out. Everybody knows what happens at the Coldplay concert or what happened there. And the two very top people in a company were found completely entangled in their affair. And what's really disturbing is that there were other people from their office there as
right,
well. So it wasn't just like they were out on a date. This was a company function. So it goes so much deeper than just two people being caught in an affair.
right.
It's the ethics that come along with you're the CEO and the people commander, and you're here completely violating your own company policies with the people that you work with, who probably also know that the both of you are married. So just
Right.
that, you know, that whole aspect of it, it's just this huge debacle. And it's interesting to see what is coming out of it, as far as not the public humiliation aspect, but the conversations that are taking place. People are saying, what they would do, what they wouldn't do. I think everybody is siding with the spouses and the children in this particular situation. But then it's also bringing up a lot of conversation around employment and employer boss, like what they're supposed to do, and the standards that we hold them to. And are those standards really realistic? But yeah,
Yeah.
anyway, so that all ties in, like we were having before the show, that conversation about the shadow work. So that's something that we're going to talk about today.
Right. Now let's talk about how shadow work plays into that, because I do believe our programming and our shadows that either we've created or other people have given us to create or expand upon plays into everything that we do or don't do in our lives. So here are people who clearly had a belief that they needed something else outside of their families,
Yes.
outside of their marriage, outside of whatever it was. And I honestly believe, and I'm not a psychiatrist, so I'm not diagnosing anyone, but this is kind of narcissistic tendencies too. I can do this. Everyone in my office knows about this, and I'm not going to get caught. I'm smarter than my family. I'm smarter than the person I married. Um, that is shadow. That is something that needs to be brought up and gotten out. Maybe not quite this publicly, but that is something that both of these people involved had, that they need to work through, that they need to deal with. Now, if you look at the spouses and the families, this also plays into theirs. What's going to happen? Well, from what I've read, you know, at least on one side of this situation, she's not going to put up with him doing this. That is a healthier sense of self-esteem than he had. I've read a lot about what makes people have affairs. And a lot of the time, it seems like a poor sense of self, poor sense of self-esteem, poor sense of being happy in who you are. And all of that is shadow work stuff.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be happy in who you are yourself before you can be happy in who you are as a couple. And that wasn't happening in that situation. So while I know a lot of people are saying, well, this poor woman, well, she's standing in her own power.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling sorry for her. She's going to be fine. You know, who I do feel a little bad for is him. because he created this mess that is likely going to take down his entire life.
Yeah.
So, you know, does he deserve having his entire life taken down? Well, maybe, it's not up to us to make that determination. But I can tell you, I don't feel bad for her. The wife, I don't feel bad for at all, because yeah, it's trauma. Yeah, it's something very personal that's been made very, very public. But from what I've seen, she's going to be okay. She's pretty strong. Now, she probably falls apart completely, when the cameras are off.
Yeah.
But that's expected. But her dialogue is of a woman who's like, yeah, this hurts, this sucks, but you know what? I'm gonna come out on top. And I believe she will. But yes, all of that just wraps back around to shadow work. And I think a lot of times as human beings, we go through life on autopilot.
Yes.
And we just act and we react without realizing what we're really doing. And, doing to ourselves, doing to other people around us. And that's because we're not taught to look at our reasons for doing things. That's personal opinion, but I don't think you're really taught, well, why did you react like that? That simple question can really make people think sometimes.
Yeah, she's definitely going to have a journey of healing,
Mhm.
but she's going to have to go through all of the betrayal and the why me's and whatnot, but she is going to come out on top for
Well,
sure.
yep.
So you said narcissistic, and sometimes I wonder, I mean, is it just narcissistic? Because is everybody in that category of narcissism, or are some people just adrenaline junkies and they like the thrill of
And that could
all
be
of the
too.
secretive stuff?
Yeah. I think every single person on the planet has narcissistic tendencies
100%.
from time to time. Does not mean you are a narcissist. It means every
Right.
single one of us has that tendency at some point or another. It's, none of us really know what another person is thinking.
Right.
But generally, people who do have affairs are not happy in themselves. Even if your relationship is horrible and you don't want to be in it anymore, the right thing to do is have that conversation and end things before you start something else. And that's just someone who doesn't care about other people. You have to have respect for each other in a relationship. And if one person is having an affair, that is a definite inclination. They do not have respect for this other person. And that disrespect is what kills, I think, a lot of relationships. Is just if you're going to do something that you know is going to hurt the other person. Sometimes if you're just not happy and you just know this isn't going to work out, then you have this conversation and you end up hurting that person.
Yeah.
That is different from, I don't want to have that conversation and I don't want to hurt them, but I'm going to hurt them because I'm going to go over here and start this new relationship. You have to have respect for each other.
I was cheated on with a former spouse or by a former spouse. And part of the reasoning for him doing what he did was because I was not the same person that he married. When we were married, I was going to school, I was in college, I had these dreams and desires. Life shifted, the path became a completely different path, and I became a stay-at-home mom. and a military spouse, or spouse to somebody in the military. And so my life pattern totally shifted, and I didn't have the same drive for what I originally did. My drive shifted to, being a good wife, a good mother, and, the provider and all of that for within our household. So
Right.
it shifted. And that was something that he was not wanting. That wasn't the path that he had chosen for himself at that point. So he had a really hard time shifting into what our now together life had become, being parents and being, a stay-at-home mom and the guy who goes out and does the
Right.
work and pays the bills. It was really a difficult adjustment for him because that wasn't something that he wanted as soon as it happened for us. I don't know that he was necessarily narcissistic. I do think his coping mechanisms and his communication and his inability to pivot to that and change his perspective was really, really low
Yeah.
for what came from our relationship.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's, I think a lot of relationships have that. um, the thing to remember for me is that if this person that you're in a relationship with is not willing to talk about things like changes as they come up, then to me, that's like this relationship is not going to work.
Right.
When my most recent ex, um, when we were growing in different directions, and I was trying to say, how can we navigate this? How can we find time to be together when I'm going this way and you're going that way? And that was not a priority for him. I'm like, well, okay then. Well, bye. See ya. Because it does take that in a relationship. If you're not willing to have the difficult discussions and compromise with each other, you're not really in a relationship. You're two people sharing a house,
Yeah.
you're not a
Yeah.
relationship, you're roommates. And
Yes. Yeah.
that's kind of what I see happening in a lot of my clients' lives and in my own personal experience. When you reach that point where those conversations aren't being had, then, whistles, bells, sirens, all that stuff should be going on. I don't know that everyone, well, I know not everyone sees things the way I do, but I don't think everyone realizes the importance of having those conversations. People tend to shut down when it comes to having those difficult conversations, especially if you've not done your shadow work and you don't know for sure who you are and you don't know for sure how to navigate something. If you grew up in a dysfunctional family where I was speaking to someone last night, and between the age of 2 and 17, he had 3 different stepfathers. That's a really unsettling thing when that happens. And this is throughout your life. So in his life, he never saw 2 people that were really trying to work together, that were determined to have a family, that were determined to stick it out no matter how hard it got. So as an adult, guess what? He can't do that either. It's really one of those things that is so prevalent that no one looks at. And that's part of doing shadow work. Why is it that you can't have these conversations? Or what is it that makes you say, well, I'm out of here when things get tough? You have to figure those things out for yourself. That's not something anybody can do for you. You have to do that hard work. And sometimes I know several people who have realized, oh, that's because that's what I saw when I was a kid. And it's like, huh, okay, I don't have to do that. I'm a different person. And that's healthy, but not everyone wants to do that hard work. In fact, most people don't. uh, breathing.
Are you okay?
Breathing is good.
Yes, it's very good. The everything happens for a reason, or
Yep.
these are your lessons and whatnot. It really does drive you back to that shadow work and figuring out who you are and what makes you tick and, why you're here.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Everything goes back to you doing your shadow work. People need to take responsibility for themselves. I told you before the show, I was watching someone on TV last night, and I won't mention his name because, he's quite not well known. But this was about space and about science and about things that I absolutely know for a fact exist. And when someone with that kind of, well, it's kind of his job, but it's also like a responsibility. People look up to this person and they say something that is absolutely opposed to your belief system. That forces you to take a look at it. And for me, that was very triggering. It's like, how can you say that? But I had to take a step back and go, why did that trigger me so much? And for me, it came down to when I've always been able to see things. I was that kid that talked to dead people. I saw dead people everywhere, and a multitude of other things too. And I was always told, you didn't see that. That wasn't real. So when I grew up and I realized, you know what, they just didn't know. They just didn't see. Doesn't make them bad people. It means they didn't see things like I did. And I thought I was past that. And then last night, here comes this person that I have admired for years doing the same thing. And I'm like, okay, I was not as healed as I thought. And I think that's what we all do. Yeah. We're never finished. We're never finished working on ourselves.
Right.
And I think people, to a large degree, they think they're done learning when they graduate, whatever they graduated from. Okay, I'm done. Don't have to learn anything else. You're always learning. You're always growing. So it just is a never-ending thing.
When I was in a philosophy class, there was a discussion in the class about what is beauty, and nobody could really say what beauty is, because obviously it's in the eye of the beholder. What one person finds beautiful, somebody else might not.
Right.
But the whole premise of the conversation was beauty is here. But once you get here, guess what? It can go to here and it can go to here. So there's always this continual movement and progress. So that's same thing with our lives and the work that we have to do. Once you get to that goal, or where you want to be, guess what? You can always raise the bar again and work towards that next step and that next step and that next step. So yeah. I've done some digging into shadow work, because I will be honest, I have not done all of the work that I should probably do, but just to kind of see how everything kind of scaffolded from one thought group to another thought group or whatnot. And I have discovered some things that absolutely 100% make sense for me. I want to take just a minute to have a conversation with you, Kellie, about a conversation you and I had just on the phone. Oh my gosh, maybe 10 years ago. So I was going through it with the guy that I was involved with at the time. And we were just kind of in a stagnant relationship. It wasn't toxic. It wasn't terrible. It's just that our growth was not going in the same direction. And you did somewhat of a past life regression for me. And one of the lives that I had lived was back in like the Western days when like the gold rush and way back in the pioneer days. And one of the things that you had seen for me was I was in an argument with a gentleman from that timeline who ended up shooting me
Mhm.
in the leg. It caught my femoral artery and I died. Well, when I was doing my shadow work, I discovered that part of one of my archetypes is the prostitute. And it is probably the top archetype for me because I absolutely always put myself in survival mode. I
Yep.
will have that exchange. And this is not sex trade,
Right.
for terminology for prostitute. I just don't know another word that could be
Right.
used. But it's the selling myself short
Yep.
to make sure staying at a job that I hate to have a paycheck,
Yep.
or staying in a relationship because my bills are paid or whatever. And I think that is like one of the number one archetypes for me. And I remembered in doing my research, that story, not the story, but the conversation that you and I had, where I was a prostitute in that lifeline. And he was probably like the owner of the brothel. I don't want to say pimp, but he was probably my pimp. And that was one of the storylines or life timelines that I had. And it connected back to like what I do presently. And it was just so fascinating. I wanted to bring that up because I was reminded of that.
Yeah, it's when you start really looking into how you respond in certain circumstances, it's really eye-opening. There are things that I learned about myself that people would always tell me, and I'm like, no, 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 no. And through doing this movie project, I realized they're absolutely right. They were
Ugh,
always right. And I didn't see that in myself because it had been so buried through mostly trauma. But,
okay.
I have always written. My grandmother would tell people that I literally started writing when I could hold a crayon. And I would always tell people stories. I could go on a nature walk and look at that squirrel. Okay, that squirrel has a wife and 3 kids, and the brother lives around on the other side of the tree, and I would just instantly, it was there. And I would always be criticized for that.
Mm.
And always wish, put that down, don't do that, don't, and or you'll never do anything with that. And then people would always talk about a leader role. Oh, well, you were born to be a leader. And I'm like, no, 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 no. And doing this movie, I've realized I've accidentally stepped into that.
Yeah.
And I had a Zoom meeting with several people the other day, and among them was a couple of the animator people. And one of them called me their illustrious leader, and I went, what? What did you just say? But by doing shadow work and by realizing that a lot of what you are and who you are is not really what you are and who you are, it was put there, or you put it there yourself through survival mode. Survival mode will do that more than anything else. And I had a lot of trauma and a lot of abuse and a lot of neglect. And every time you go through something that knocks you down just a little bit, what you really are and who you really are gets buried deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's why it's so important to do your shadow work. If someone tells you something that you don't see in yourself, ask yourself questions.
Yeah.
Why do they see that in me? Why don't I see that in me? And be open to the answers. Sometimes the answers we find inside ourselves aren't pretty to look at. There's
Right.
things you have to look at to get through it, but they're not pretty. Everyone has done something in their past that they've buried and they don't really want to take it out and look at it. Um, you have to You have to for yourself and for all the things that you are supposed to be doing. I get asked about karma and past lives a lot more than I wish I got asked, honestly. And it's always, if you go through life and you do not heal your soul and do that shadow work and become who you're supposed to be, or remember who you really are, come back again and try it next time. And if you don't do it, then you're going to come back again and do it again until you get it right. And the thing is, having looked at a lot of past lives and a lot of people and a lot of Akashic records, the lives get harder as you put off doing that work. They get harder, and then you have more work to do, and then you have more work to do. So do yourself a favor and do your shadow work now. Dig deep into yourself. If you get so deep into yourself and who you are that you finally realize you don't exist, you've got it. Because we're all connected. We are all energy. We are all everything. And once you get to that point, yeah, you're healed. Most people don't get to that point. You can. It takes a lot of work, though. So what else?
I don't know. I think that's good.
My throat is very sore today. I've been coughing. Allergies. I swear I have to move, guys. I have to. Like the videos, share them, subscribe to my channel so I can get out of this state that is trying to kill me. Yeah. Talk about shadow work. Why am I here? Yeah. It's really important, though. And I know I keep saying that, but it really is that important. And I hear people say to me all the time, and people who have paid me for private coaching sessions have told me, yeah, I get it, but there's no but.
That's my favorite word.
You have to do it. And you can do it in bits and pieces. You don't have to do everything at one time. It's just important that you know what your triggers are. Start there. A lot of people don't know what their triggers are. They go through life and they get upset and they don't know why they're upset. At one time, I worked in a corporate situation. And I did politics early in my life too. And there was a situation where there was a giant corporation that wanted to come into one particular town where I was part of the political scene. And everyone was up in arms against it and against it and against it and against it. And finally, they pushed it through. In spite of what everybody wanted, they just pushed it through. And I have often felt guilty about that because I was in a position to have stopped it. And I didn't. I let it go. And it was an environmental disaster. And I was long gone by then. It didn't happen immediately. But my point in that is if there is something you come up against and it just doesn't feel right, you have to speak up. You have to say, this isn't right. Because if you don't, and something happens, you are going to feel guilty for decades afterwards. You have to stand in your power. And if you are going through life being triggered and you don't know why you're being triggered, you're not in your power. You're not in your personal power. You probably don't even know where it is. It's over here somewhere. So you have to grow and you have to heal and you have to stick up for yourself. Stick up for what you think is right. Doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. Stick up for you. That's all part of your shadow work. Everything goes back to it. You can't make a bright future for yourself if you don't do some shadow work and realize why you've been holding yourself back. And that's what we do. We hold ourselves back. It's not your great Aunt Edna's fault. It's not your boss's fault. It's not the guy that rear-ended you on the highway's fault. You are responsible for you. So I think we can leave it there unless you have something to add.
I think we can too. I just wanted to make the announcement that we are going to every other week.
Yeah.
Our schedules have shifted for good. And so we will be going to an every other week show from here on out.
Yep.
Until further notice.
And please check out Lately and the Elephants, the poster behind you.
Oh, it's going to be so good. I'm so excited.
Thank you guys for watching. We will see you again soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.